Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. What is going on? It's me, Jeremy Branch of Be Terrible Movies, and I am joined on the line with a very special guest, somebody I've been wanting to connect with for quite some time. Ladies and gentlemen, give a welcome to Harrison Smith.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And so I've been looking forward to talking to you for a couple of different reasons. I kind of met you through mutual friends on Twitter, and you've got a project going on that has really piqued my interest. It's a film called Death House. Can you kind of educate us a little bit on what's going on with that?
Sure. Well, I just left the editing studio probably about 40 minutes ago. So the film is done with its first rough cut, and we're getting ready for a picture lock. And really excited. It's coming out great. We should be having a trailer extremely soon. And it's going well. I mean, I love it. I think the film is terrific. It's been billed online as the Expendables of horror. We did not call it that. I don't believe that's what it is.
You don't like that name from what I've read. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't like that at all because it implies a gimmick. There's no gimmick to this. I wrote an article about it on my cinema page called, I write a series of articles called Cinema, which is about cynicism in filmmaking. And I made it very clear that this is not a Freddy versus Jason or a Candyman meets Pinhead kind of movie. To me, that's not much different than Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I actually did read that write-up, and I thought it was fantastic. It raises a bunch of interesting points. The thing that spoke to me about it is it wasn't conceived as an Expendables of horror because it was written by one of the most iconic, it was originally written by one of the most iconic people in horror film history, a gentleman named Gunnar Hansen. To some of our casual listeners, that may not be a household name, but that is Leatherface from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right. And you make a good point right there, Jeremy, about what my last piece was about, and that is people who are into horror. If they're listening to your podcast, a casual horror fan, fine, but these people that claim to be these, hardcore horror fans, and really the scope of horror for them is Friday the 13th or The Evil Dead, that's not a horror fan.
Right.
That's somebody who's along for the ride and, likes the designer label of horror, but you should know your horror, and that's what the gist of my latest article was about. And that is, with Death House, we have a lot of history in it as well too. There's an incredible amount of history with Death House, and you got to know your stuff. And there are a lot of Easter eggs in Death House.
Very
and
cool.
They're not all visual. Like, the real horror fans are going to be like, holy shit, I can't believe they put that in there. That's what we are aiming for. We have dialogue from films that, you got to really know your horror. But at the same time, it's not a movie where you got to just sit and do your homework. It's an enjoyable film. We have plenty of blood and gore, lots of violence, lots of action. But we also happen to have a damn good story. Right. And as you know, what I reference, and this is talking about the casual horror person, one of the editors in the editing studio said, about Kane Hodder's character, and said, well, you never really explain how his character can heal himself. Like, if he gets shot, the bullet wounds heal and all that. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, you love Friday the 13th, right? He's like, oh man, he goes, it's one of my favorite of all time. I've seen them all. I own them all. I'm like, okay. Well, did you ever ask how Jason Voorhees comes back from the dead every time?
Right.
And he's like, well, no, you just kind of accept it. I said, so when Kane wears a mask, you accept it. When Kane doesn't wear a mask, you want an explanation.
And that's a very interesting concept that kind of leads me down the path. And I'm not real sure how you felt about Rob Zombie's remakes of Halloween, but I like the shape. I like this concept of something that's unknowable, something that is just pure, unadulterated evil. And don't get me wrong, there were some things that Rob Zombie did that I respected about his film, but one of the things that I didn't like is that he tried to explain these
Right.
things that we should leave to our imagination. I mean, that's what gets into our heads, and that's the stuff of nightmares, as opposed to, oh, well, you see, he was abused as a child, and that's why.
Well, it comes down to, Jeremy, it comes down to, like, in history. You know, people have asked me, would you go back in history and who would you talk to? And when I name some of the people I would like to talk to, you know, they always say you wouldn't talk to Hitler. And I'm like, why would I want to talk to Hitler? Hitler didn't believe he was evil. Hitler believed the garbage that he spouted. So you're not going to get anything from Hitler,
right?
You know. But my point about it is, everybody tries to explain why Hitler did what he did. Why did he hate the Jews? Why did he, you know, create the Holocaust? And the thing is, you know, they go back and they try to give like almost an origin story to Hitler. Well, a Jewish doctor, you know, was responsible for the death of his mother, which that's a total lie. That's not true. And Hitler did not hate the Jews because of a Jewish doctor. But, you know, people go, oh, yeah, he did. No, he didn't. And most of all, there is no reason to ever try to explain Hitler, because to explain Hitler opens the door to forgiving Hitler.
To sympathize with him. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so I don't want to sympathize with Michael Myers. You know, Michael Myers, to me, what made him scary in the original 78 Halloween is that he's kind of like a tornado. He just touched down in this town.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it's like when a tornado hits your house but doesn't hit your neighbors, or vice versa. There's no reason to it.
Yeah.
And before this garbage of, well, he was Jamie Lee Curtis's brother and all of that crap, which was never supposed to be, the scariness of Michael Myers is his randomness.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's scary.
That analogy to the tornado is fantastic. I'm going to steal that, and I'm going to use it to sound like an educated film guy. We kind of breezed over the fact that Kane Hodder is in Death House.
Yeah.
He's obviously another just icon in the horror community, but there are also several other actors that appear in the film, and I'll let you name them.
There are a lot of actors. There are a lot.
So we've got Sid Haig.
Yep.
We've got maybe Tony Todd. Is Tony Todd in it?
We sure do.
We have, man, I looked at the entire list and it is just so impressive. It's a who's who of all of the most iconic, and I guess that's where the Expendables comparison came from. You have Dee Wallace in the movie.
Yep.
Dee Wallace, who is top billed in Steven Spielberg's E.T., is in your film.
And Dee Wallace, who should have gotten an Academy Award for Cujo.
Absolutely. And then you also have Barbara Crampton, who not only is one of the most beautiful scream queens of all time, but she stayed relevant working with people like Adam Wingard on movies like You're Next. And I mean, she stayed in the horror genre. And so I think it's just so cool to see. Obviously, this is a passion project for so many of these people. Do you think what they responded to the most was maybe that it was an homage to Gunnar Hansen, or do you think that the story itself was just so compelling, or was it a mix of both?
Well, you know, sure, any writer would love to say that they wrote a story that was just so compelling that, you know, the talent just had to flock to it. I think a lot of it was their loyalty to Gunnar and their respect for the man. The project had been going around Hollywood since 2010. It was brought to me right around 2014 and 2015, it was brought to me. And, you know, I mean, Gunnar admitted, he said, look, I have a script. I want to put a lot of horror names in it, but it's just not grabbing anyone. And Gunnar openly admitted, I had trouble. He goes, I have trouble with dialogue. And the plot just, and again, this is nothing that wasn't said between Gunnar and myself, so I'm not talking badly about Gunnar. The plot itself was kind of derivative. It really, his theme was fantastic about good and evil and all of that stuff. The issue was the execution. I mean, the original plot involved a documentary film crew going into the basement of an abandoned asylum, and you find out that it's not really abandoned. Well, we've seen this kind of movie before.
Sure.
And he knew that. And even some of his horror friends had said that. Like, you know, Gunnar, just change it up a little and get back to us. Well, you know, things went back and forth. Somebody came in and did another rewrite of it, and it was horrendous. I mean, that rewrite holy crap, they turned it into torture porn,
Right.
you know?
Sure.
And then because Gunnar's script was eloquent, it was very, you know, high concept, and I always say very kind of like The Shining is what it was like.
Very cool.
So, you know, then I got the idea of, why does it have to be an asylum? Why can't it be a prison? And then it went from there. And instead of the Expendables of horror, I always describe this film as kind of Jurassic Park without the dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah, great. That's a great analogy.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And I changed things up. I added a science fiction element to it. I kept what Gunnar requested. Gunnar read the drafts. And, you know, as we all know, Gunnar was terminal with pancreatic cancer, and he never let on about that. But Gunnar did, you know, in his final days, you know, he did say, I give Harrison's script my blessing, and I want this movie made. And I remember him saying, he said, look, exploit my death. When I die, there's going to be press. And we're like, geez, Gunnar, you know, that's like being vultures. He's like, no. He said, film it on my grave if you have to.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And coming from somebody like that, I can totally believe it. It's got to be quite an honor to get a blessing directly from him. That's awesome. I was gonna ask if you've met him, but obviously you had many conversations.
I met with him several times face to face, and then you know, numerous phone calls with him as well too.
I do want to mention that I blew right past the name Robert Englund as being a cast member in the film. And wow, he's just, once he left the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, I think that most of the fans left the franchise with him. So he's just one of those people so synonymous with the genre.
Well, Robert is not in Death House.
Okay.
He is not. You know, my answer to that always is, and I have nothing but respect for Robert, and I think he's a great guy. But, you know, my answer is when fans go to the horror convention, they can ask Robert why he's not in Death House.
Sure.
That's what
Absolutely.
I said. Because Robert was asked to be in Death House. So
you explained a little bit to me about the Jurassic Park element, and I didn't ask you to elaborate, but I assume that the reason why you say that is in Jurassic Park, the power goes out and the dinosaurs are let loose.
Right.
So yeah, we've got a similar concept in this.
Yes, we have a similar concept where the prison is knocked offline by an internal EMP blast.
Awesome.
And they never expected that to happen. They always expected an EMP blast from the outside, never one to detonate from the inside, which knocks everything offline. Everything with a circuit board is basically fried.
That's awesome. So we've talked a little bit about your project. I want to pick your brain a little bit about your horror sensibilities. I don't know exactly what your age is, but I grew up, you know, as a young kid watching a lot of the 80s slashers.
Sure. Well, I'm 48, so I grew up, I was a teenager smack dab in the middle of the 80s. I am definitely an 80s kid.
Okay, so then a lot of your sensibilities maybe come from those slasher movies? Okay.
Well, not just slasher, but, you know, a different kind of horror, which I'm not into torture porn. I'm not into those kind of movies. I think that's fine for people who like them. That's not what I watch, and that's not what I like to make. When I'm, you know, sitting on Netflix and, you know, a woman is held hostage in a basement and sexually tortured, why the hell do I want to sit and watch that?
I agree.
You know, give me monsters. You know, give me something like that. You know, I mean, it's just, there's so much. Like, for example, I think Seven is a movie. First of all, I saw it once. I never want to see it again. I think Seven is absolutely a horror film. I don't think it's not a thriller. It's not a cop movie. It is a horror movie. And it is horrific. That's what I think. And I think Seven is one of those movies that's too good for its own good. It was just so powerful to me. And most of all, so nihilistic. And
absolutely.
I never want to see it again. But I'm not saying it's bad, because you're going to get people listening going, oh, what are you talking about? It was great. I didn't say it wasn't. I think it is great. I think it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. I just never want to see it again.
It's interesting you say that, because I've always said David Fincher is such a nihilist. It's a theme that he carries throughout all of his movies, even like Gone Girl, you know, which was his most recent. And I respect him for that. I do like a little bit of a walk into the dark side. A lot of my sensibilities from like the 80s. I love Sam Raimi's work, like The Evil Dead, especially the second one. You know, I like a little mix of the horror and the comedy. What I wanted to ask you is a little bit about some of the practical effects that you guys implemented. Was that some of your favorite days on the set?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to say it, and it's going to sound like real bragging. We have a practical effect that rivals the chest burster scene in the original Alien.
That is a bold statement, my friend.
It is a bold statement, and I'm going to stand by it.
Love it. Love it. So can you give us a little bit of context as to what it is, or are we going to have to wait to see it?
I think you should wait and see it, but I'll tell you this. You'll know it when you see it.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Alien is another one of those movies. A lot of people kind of want to classify it as a science fiction, but to me...
No, it's a horror movie.
Absolutely. Like old school gothic haunted house horror movie just set in space, which makes it...
Yeah, I think Alien is basically a perfect motion picture. I really do.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. And then Jaws is another one that people overlook.
Jaws is the movie that made me want to make movies. I saw it when I was 8 years old in the theaters.
Really? Yeah. I live here on the Gulf Coast, and there is not a day goes by that I get in the water that I don't at least hear that, right? You know what I mean? Creep into my mind. So yeah, it is one that's really stuck with our culture. Of the 80s slashers, if you had to pick, and I know you've got a little bit of stakes in this right now, so maybe you've got to find a real diplomatic answer, but who is your favorite of the slashers?
Well, I'm gonna say of the slashers, I gotta tell you, I am a huge fan of the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
I
think the reason why is because it was so the opposite of the slasher movie, but at the same time, I mean, because also it just really offered up something a little fresh and a little new, and it was fun, and it had a great cast, and I'm, personal friends with Amanda Wyss, and, like, I just think it really is. However, I will tell you that I think, for me, Psycho 2 made the most impact on me as a filmmaker in this genre, in the slasher genre. I think Tom Holland's Psycho 2 I should say Richard Franklin, who directed it, but Tom Holland wrote it. And I love Tom Holland's screenplay, and I'm a huge fan of Tom Holland between that and the 1985 Fright Night.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know?
The score in Fright Night is so freaking good. I can remember the saxophone stuff to this day, you know?
Yeah, it's the sexiest horror film ever made.
It really is. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And the remake with Colin Farrell, not a bad movie.
No, it's not a bad movie, but it didn't belong being called Fright Night. There was nothing about it that stood out to be Fright Night. I mean, Fright Night was an homage to an era that was dying right at that time. Cable television was, fading out these old, horror stars, and, VCRs and all of that were replacing them, and kids were more interested in a different type of horror. They didn't want Dracula anymore. They didn't want Frankenstein anymore. They didn't want those things. And the concept of like Dr. Shock or Uncle Ted or, all these people that got on TV and hosted these late night horror shows, well, they were fading away. Mm-hmm. And it was an era that, Tom Holland's Fright Night is more of a Valentine to a bygone era of Hammer films and all of that. And I have a piece on that on cinema where, I've had people younger than me watch and go, I don't get it. Like, I don't get, why does the girl's hair get long when she becomes a vampire? Because you're not understanding all the illusions that are drawn to it of sexual repression from the Victorian the Victorian 1900s, and you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
they don't get any of it, and that's why I say, as horror fans need to step up their game and be smarter and stop accepting these regurgitations, these remakes, these reboots. And the only reason why they're making these things is because people are going to see them and demand something different. So right away when they heard Death House is being made, it's going to be Freddy and Pinhead. No, it's not, because you know why? It's fucking stupid. That's why.
Right. And
it's for morons.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, people can go, well, wait a minute, I love Freddy versus Jason. That's your problem, dude. It took 18 scripts. 18 scripts to come up with that? Really?
I enjoyed it for camp, though.
I guess, but it's a reminder that the better days for both of those villains were behind them. No different than watching a very old-looking Bela Lugosi prance around one more time as Count Dracula with Bud Abbott and Lou Costello.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said earlier.
It's
with
no
Abbott
different.
And Costello. So I was gonna ask you, but now I already know. How do you feel about this whole new slate of horror movies being remade? We've got Halloween, we've got Friday the 13th.
Well, remade which time?
Right? Yeah.
What are we on? What are we on now? The second and third reboots of these things?
So do you think that it's that the characters themselves became so iconic to the franchises that people just aren't willing to accept these new incarnations of them?
That's a great question, Jeremy. I don't know. I think part of it is, I think with the rise of the internet, people's viewing windows have closed. So they become very myopic. They only see what they want to see, and they only watch what they want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't give, there's so much good horror being made out there, and there's so much good new stuff, and everybody says they want new stuff, but then they turn right around and when somebody says to me, watching Nightmare on Elm Street, and they go, oh wow, the movie's really dated. What does that mean? Of course it's dated. It's older.
It came out years ago. Yeah, no doubt.
Right, of course it's dated. But why is that a bad thing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why can't you just appreciate? Like, why does everything have to be fresh and new now? Like, why should we go back like Spielberg did in E.T.? Do we have to CGI cell phones into people's hands,
right,
or walkie-talkies or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Like, why can't you just watch a movie and fucking enjoy it instead of, oh, it's dated, oh, it's this. So, okay, it's dated. So they updated Nightmare on Elm Street, and guess what? You got a shitty movie.
It's shit, yeah, right. No doubt about it.
Okay, so there you go. You got your reboot. It's all modern now. The kids are talking on cell phones. They're doing social media. Oh, guess what? It sucks.
Absolutely. So, all right. I've kind of been talking to you for long enough to pick up on the fact that you are a writer. Do you consider yourself a director or a writer first?
I think I'm a writer first, and then I'm a director. I wrote The Fields. I did not direct The Fields. I wrote 6 Degrees of Hell. I didn't direct 6 Degrees of Hell. I wrote and directed Camp Dread. Camp Dread was my debut.
Awesome.
And then I wrote and directed Zombie Killers, Elephant's Graveyard. And then I just wrote and directed Death House,
And do you find that this is probably a loaded question, do you find that working with so much talent, and especially in an ensemble, that egos come into play, or was it a good atmosphere on the set?
Everybody asks that. Look, no matter what you do, whether you're on a construction site, you're working in an office, it doesn't matter. You have egos. You have people, you have people that are really nice to work with, and you have some that you hope a lightning bolt hits them, So it's like, now I don't wish for a lightning bolt to hit anybody that I've worked with on set, but what I'm saying is, sure, you always have issues, you always have some that have egos, but I gotta tell you, working with horror people, there's some of the nicest damn people, and I'm not just saying this just to say it for like good press.
Right.
Making Death House was a pleasure. I mean, so goddamn nice.
That's awesome.
They really were. They were friendly, and they were nice, and they were patient, and everybody was like, yeah, man, we're just here. We're here to have fun. We're here to do this. And
great.
Everybody said it, like, we're here for Gunnar too. Like, this was Gunnar's dream, and it's like, look at these people. Like, it was really cool to watch Kane, Michael Berryman, and Bill Moseley do the Three Stooges, hello, hello, hello. Like,
hell yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, I bet it was.
I turned to my first assistant director, and I said, we're seeing something pretty cool right here. Like, this is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. You were involved in a major part of horror history, and that's something really awesome. And that's why I've been excited to talk to you. I don't know if you saw the pictures, but I do have Tony Todd, and I have Doug Bradley hanging on my walls, autographed, that I've met at conventions. And like you said, they were both extremely nice. Tony Todd is somebody that has kind of been able to transcend his role as Candyman.
I think Tony Todd is just so damn gifted. I mean, you know, he has such a presence, and it was so important to have him in this film. And Tony opens the movie. That's the prominence. Tony is the first of the horror icons to open this movie.
He's got the best, like, rich baritone voice, and he just commands presence, you know? He's an awesome guy.
I think I could sit and listen to Tony Todd read the phone book for like 3 hours.
No doubt, right? No doubt.
And just be like, wow, this is fascinating.
So, when are we going to be able to view this movie? Is it going to be available for digital download? Are you going to take it to the convention circuit?
No, it's going to be available for theatrical.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yep, this is going to theaters. Yep, this is going theatrical.
Good for you. That is awesome news. I really do appreciate you spending a little bit of time talking to me. Before we get out of here, you got any other things in the works?
I always have things in the works. Number one, we are working on a Death House sequel. There are 5 sequels planned.
Wow.
The sequel is called The Farm, and it has something to do with the opening and closing of the film. And I think when people see that, they'll appreciate that. Got a number of other projects in the works. I don't usually name all the projects because sometimes the projects happen and sometimes they don't.
Absolutely.
And when they don't, people go, oh, so you were full of shit. So I don't do that. Yeah. In other words, I'm always working. I'm always looking for the next thing. The big thing right now, of course, is getting Death House getting it out in theaters. And I'm extremely happy with the cut. I think I did very right by all of our icons that are in the film.
Good.
I think they're going to be very proud of this movie, and I'm excited. So, I mean, it's a really good film.
That's exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So definitely, I'll be keeping an eye out for it. You mentioned that you have a blog. Tell the folks how to go and check out your writing as well.
Sure. It is horrorfuel.com.
Okay.
And it deals with cynicism in filmmaking. It's not a movie review site. The internet has plenty of those. This deals with looking at movies like, for example, in my opinion, the worst motion picture ever made, ever, is Jaws 4, The Revenge. Jaws the Revenge is the worst goddamn movie ever made. And the reason why is because it was made by people who knew better. And they could have made a better film. They actively and consciously chose not to.
They sabotaged
that is cynical.
It. Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't even sabotage it. They just didn't even try.
I really like what I read of your work. I really like the way that you deconstruct movies. And like you said, there's a lot of places you can go and get reviews on movies. I mean, everybody knows Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, but to actually get a little bit of insight from somebody who has written, who has directed films, who has had an opportunity to work with all of these great people, I think is a value. So to my listeners, you guys should definitely go and check that out. And then also, Harrison, how can we find you on social media if we want to bug you on Twitter or Facebook? You got pages over there?
My movies have Facebooks. I do not have a personal Facebook.
Okay.
But I do run a Twitter account. I don't even know the handle. I think it's Harrison85.
Fantastic.
And you can find me on Twitter there. My cinema piece is spelled Cynema.
Okay.
It's called Cinema. And, that's where you can find me. I'm pretty accessible on Twitter, unless somebody's a douchebag and you have to mute them or whatever. But
you talk to this douchebag, and that means a lot to me, man. I appreciate it.
No. It's, you know what I'm saying? Like, you always get, like, there are these people that will post, like, oh, Death House is coming out. Well, can't wait to see that one suck. And my response usually back is, oh, and when is your movie coming out? Oh, that's right. You don't make any.
Isn't that the truth?
That's right. You don't do anything. You just sit and criticize on the internet.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you so much, Harrison, for talking to me. I look forward to hopefully doing it again in the future. Maybe we can do a follow-up episode.
Not a problem. It'd be a pleasure.
All right, my friend. Have a fantastic day, and we'll stay in touch.
You got it, Jeremy. Take care now.
Yep.